when you actually run your own business, I suppose it's it's all on your shoulders or the shoulders of the owners. But but even so, you shouldn't really spend too much time thinking about it, right?
Yeah,
and I've kind of trained myself to go to bed and not think about it.
Yeah,
Anyway,
you got to be able to separate work from life and life from work. And
yeah,
if you
all
don't
right.
have that ability, you'll end up going nuts.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning with me, Peter Giblett, and with me, as always, the moment, Mike Cushman. So,
Morning, Niagara.
Yeah, morning, everybody. So, what is Dave doing? Have you seen him on recently? So he flew off to the Azores, then he took a boat to Portugal, and now he's in Portugal.
Yeah, all the history he's looking at. Imagine.
Yeah. But imagine how he's going to be when he gets back. We're going to have to bar him from talking about holidays.
Probably take a long time to unwind, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that he's got to process that he's done in that little bit of time, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what's Dave. That's what he likes, going on these trips. That's for sure, right?
Sure. That's what you retire for. Enjoy the parts of life that you never had time to enjoy at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a history nut. He's a history nut, so I'm sure he looks at everything, right?
Yeah. When I've gone on vacation, I've gone on a few like month-long vacations, but I don't go on too many vacations.
Yeah, me neither. I'm a homebody.
Yeah.
Always have been.
Well, I've been a lot of places, but actually I've been a lot of places for work as well.
And traveling and seeing different cultures, good, right? Like,
yeah,
good for your mind, good for your soul.
Yeah, and how different people work is also good, right? But anyway, I guess that what happened is he spent about 3 or 4 days in the Azores. He then spent about a week on the boat. Haven't really seen any of those pictures. He did publish a few of them, but then he's been about 3 or 4 days in Portugal now. And yep, it's okay. Good morning, Randy West. Good morning.
Morning, Randy.
Yeah. Okay, so well, I wish him well on the rest of his holiday. And as I said, he needs to pay some greenback to get back into the show, I think. Make a donation to somewhere. Oh, damn, he's missed a donation anyway. How can I win with Dave,
Yeah,
I can never win with that guy, can I?
Pretty busy guy when he's doing all that, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. Does a good job.
Yeah, all right. Great.
Yeah. No, and we don't, whatever we might feel about individual charities, etc., we can't complain about them because people like Kiwanis are doing good things for our children and good things for our community in general.
Anybody that goes above and beyond to help the community, and voluntary work is just spectacular in my mind. Not enough people step forward. Most people sit on the couch and complain, right? If you get off the couch and you do something and you put yourself out there, I always say hats off to you. It's great stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a case of even here doing what we're doing here in the morning. I think it's it's a step in the right direction. We can't influence everybody, never can. But you can say your piece and hope somebody listens.
I love the idea, and you watch media today and how many people really talk about the issues that are happening, right? So
yeah. Well,
a lot.
this is actually the thing that bothers me about 24-hour news coverage. When I thought, when I first heard about CNN, I'd never seen CNN, but I'd heard about it in America. I thought that would be great, because if we have 24-hour news coverage, there were things. I remember organizations I would in would ring the local newspaper, and you say, "You never covered our event," and
Well,
they'd go, "Yeah."
what's CNN cover? Politics, right?
Well,
That's about
yeah,
it.
but you see, so essentially, what would happen is we'd ring up the local newspaper and say, "Tell them about the event," and they said, "Yeah, we'll send a reporter down," and then they never did, and you call them up and say, "You never covered our event," right?
Right.
Even when you sent them a news press release about it, they didn't put anything in the newspaper or on the local press, on local TV or anything like that. And yet they're always claiming they're clamoring for news, but yet when you give it to them, they don't want to know. So I thought, with the rise of the 24-hour news stations, that would be a great thing, because those news articles, you can give 2 minutes to that, to that organization that's doing, this piece, whatever the work of that organization is, right?
Yeah, and you could get
You could
community
spare
stuff out
2
there.
minutes.
You
Yeah,
could get community stuff out there that's never going to be on any kind of news,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I don't know about you. You ever try to get a hold of CHCH to come down and do a story on something? It's not that easy.
yeah. I know. And even if you were to actually, here's a challenge though for doing that. What you do is you put the story together yourself. You edit it and you send it off as a bundle to CHCH and see if they publish it.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to try to do it, because trying to get their interest sometimes just doesn't work. But if you're Mayor Deal Daddy, you could get on TV every day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so the thing is, take for example the oil slick. If there had been like a 30-second clip by Mike Cushman about it, maybe that might have gotten on CHCH.
Yeah, it's really hard to get them to take any kind of environmental issues too. I don't find very many media people to take on environmental issues. It's almost like a WSIB issue too, right? You never see them take them on.
Yeah. And then Randy West would say the complaint then would be that the 2 minutes was televised at a bad time for everyone to see it. Yeah, it would be. That would be true. Hey, what do you mean we didn't cover it? Yeah, we put it on at 2:42 a.m. on Monday morning.
Right.
Like, yes, okay, thank you. I and the rest of the population are asleep back there right then. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. So the Supreme Court says the state is liable when a parliament enacts unconstitutional laws. I find this fascinating, because, well, in fact, I actually would ask one further question. Should individual MPs who were, are fundamentally part of said laws, should they be held liable when they pass bad laws?
Yeah, my problem of the state being held liable is it's me and you are being held liable because it's a taxpayer's money,
Yeah,
right?
I know,
I
but
have a
again, and that's exactly why I was adding that extra question: should the
yeah.
individual politician be held liable for that?
Yeah, because there's no accountability, right?
Yeah,
If a huge mistake is made and human rights are overlooked, which is your first priority, right? You're in government. Your first priority is to see if any kind of human rights are going to be hurt by any kind of policies, right? If you overlook that whole thing, how can you not be held liable for it? And what is the accountability?
yeah.
And that's the problem with our Canadian politics. There's no accountability. So they go forward with crazy ideas that really put our country back 10 years. And then where's the liabilities for being wrong or the corruption that was caused, right?
Yeah. Okay. So this upholds an earlier ruling in 2002, which is in a case called Mackin versus New Brunswick, that said the state does have limited liability when it enacts unconstitutional laws, but only when those laws are clearly wrong and in bad faith or an abuse of power. Right? And this was upheld and is sit in a 6-2 decision by the Canadian Supreme Court. And, so they concluded that limited liability stands for government. So they're saying basically government and its representatives are required to exercise their powers in good faith and with respect the established and indisputable laws that define constitutional rights of individuals. So we have to look at those constitutional rights at all times. And this is related to a gentleman by the name of Joseph Power, who was convicted of 2 counts of sexual assault, sentenced to 8 months in jail, then trained then he trained as an X-ray technician, and he worked for a long time as an X-ray technician, more than 10 years as an X-ray technician. Then he was suspended and later fired from the position because of his criminal record.
Yeah. So how is that wrong?
Well, it's basically because what they did is retroactively applied and when they put into place the Limiting Pardons for Serious Crimes Act and the Safe Streets and Communities Act, it made him permanently ineligible.
Yeah. So you were charged with sexual assault and you want to be an X-ray technician? Don't you have to touch a lot of people when you're an X-ray technician?
Well,
yeah. So there's a fine line here, because every time the Supreme Court comes up with an idea of human rights,
and I think that's why you've got 2 people dissenting.
Yeah, as soon as you get an issue of human rights, a lot of times the victim's the one that gets harmed from these ideas, right? And it doesn't make sense sometimes. So if the guy has a sexual assault record on him, and they don't want to hire him to be an X-ray technician because you have to touch people to do that, I really don't have a problem with that. Do you?
On the face of it, no. But it's where the problem lies is that he couldn't get a pardon for what had happened. For what had happened. Should he get a pardon? That's another question. But because of the change in, so it's one of these technicalities things, isn't it?
Yeah, and sexual assault and molestation and things like that in Canada seems to have very lax laws. And like I said at the beginning, that it always seems that the victims are the ones that get cast aside with these Supreme Court decisions. And isn't the ultimate thing would be to protect those victims? And
yeah, I think the issue was that when the issue in question was that he was fined until these laws came in, but because these laws applied rules retrospectively, therefore he was no longer permitted.
Right.
So it was the retrospective which caused him a human rights breach.
So it was a progressive conservative government that implemented a law, and then they implemented the law, and now the guy got punished for it.
Yeah.
So the question was so are they thinking when the law was implemented that it was a vindictive type thing?
No, I think when it comes into play, what they were looking at is the retroactive element of the law, which you see, typically when we create a law, if you commit a crime today, and I'm so offended by the fact that you committed that crime today, but it was not a crime today because you got off on a technicality. So tomorrow I go into Parliament and I make this new law up that ensures that technicality is now nailed shut, because I'm so incensed by the fact that Mike got away with this crime today. right, and then create the new law that amends the criminal code, right, that's fine. From now on, the criminal code's amended, right? But what I can't do is retroactively apply it to make you a criminal, even though the courts have said no, Mike is not a criminal.
Yeah, it's kind of sticky, eh? So,
yeah.
So
take the I as soon as you add sexual sexual assault into that matter, it kind of makes that a very emotions go up through the roof, don't they?
Yeah, sexual assault and molestation really gets the hair standing up on the back of your head,
does.
right?
It does. Always does.
Because
right?
the protections for that never make sense to most people, right?
Yeah.
So we had a federal government that made decisions on freedom fighters that weren't acceptable in the eyes of the courts. Does that mean that they're going to be held liable for that?
Yeah, well, it depends. If the court subsequently makes a law unconstitutional, you see, essentially what this particular individual is basically saying, he wants to hold government liable for the fact that he couldn't continue to earn a living as a X-ray technician.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a logical argument for somebody with a sexual assault problem. So it's sticky, right?
Again, you put people in prison for a period of time, and when they come out, we expect them to be fully functional members of society, and and by all accounts, this individual was right. We don't know any of the history about what he may or may not have done. But by all accounts, he seemed as if he was reformed. Should he have been in that job in the first place? That is a fair question, right? Especially, as you say, he has to come into personal contact with people who are in a vulnerable state.
Yes. I find it a very troubling argument when you're talking about something like that, right? Like,
yeah.
I can see the argument for other things, when somebody makes a law and it's made out of, but when somebody makes a law or regulation, there's always supposed to be room for common sense, which is number one. Number two, aren't you supposed to do all the checks of whether it's within the guidelines of the law and human rights in the first place before you even implement the thing? I mean, how could you even bring it to Parliament if it's not within the guidelines of human rights, right?
In fact, actually, exactly that. Our 1986 charter, they're supposed to consider that precisely for each law they're producing.
Yeah, right? So there's supposed to be checks and balances for this. So if the government pushed it through without doing the checks and balances, then they should be held liable for any bad decisions, 100%.
Yeah, and that's so. In principle, absolutely, this decision is right. However, the fact that it allows this, well, as a sexual assault, I don't know that he would be on the on the register, would he?
Not necessarily.
Yeah. No. But an assault, the thing is, it's because it's a sexual, if it had been some crime that was not well defined, some other crimes, you'd probably would say, well, yeah, fair enough. If it was a change to the theft law or something, you'd probably kind of go, well, you'd be saying, well, yeah, you're absolutely right, Supreme Court, right? The problem lies, it's because it's a sexual assault that we have the problem with, right?
Yes.
But there's one rule of law that applies across all laws, and that's where the Supreme Court is coming from.
Yeah, and you know, I can't argue with that idea when we started talking it out, because checks and balances are supposed to be there for anybody implementing a procedure or a law.
Yeah,
And if they don't go through the checks and balances and they just hammer it through because, like you said, it's almost a vindictive thing, right?
yeah,
So and so did something and got away with it, and I'm going to get elected and I'm going to change that. Well, you can't change that whether you're right or wrong. You have to change that the right way, and that's your
yeah,
job as a government, right? So
yeah.
if you're not changing it the right way and you're not going through the checks and balances and you're just hammering out a policy and hammering it through, then yeah, you should be held liable for that.
And whilst this concentrates, by the way, upon federal government, because clearly this individual is taking his action against the federal government, it upholds a 2002 ruling, which is Mackin versus New Brunswick, Minister of Finance. So clearly, I would say that also applies. That should apply, therefore, to every level of government, right? And let that sink in for a moment. I said every level of government, and that should also include municipal government.
Whoa, we're going
Right.
deep there, Peter, because municipal government seems to get away with more than anybody else, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. And do they think about the charter when they're implementing municipal government, rules?
Yeah, I wondered that about Doug Ford's government when he's hammering through all these policies to build homes quicker and all that.
Yeah.
First thing you're supposed to
Yep.
do is check with the indigenous people. I'm wondering if they even followed those rules with these new ideas, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I was wondering
Fair
all about
question.
that stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely fair question. And it's again, so when they develop, put a new building up that infringes somebody's rights,
Right.
would that come into play?
It's a good question. I hope they don't separate it by just saying it's a federal law and it doesn't apply to provincial and municipal, because then we
It should
have the
apply.
same old, right? I'll be
Yeah,
back in 1 minute.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the point about it, is we really need consistency across government. So that's part of the where we need. Okay, so we go to Randy West. He says we need an ongoing oversight committee made up of essentially as the same as the Supreme Court, who has the ability to very quickly examine and rule on the very current political moves, especially when personal rights and liabilities may be infringed. Right? That's an interesting point. So, if you have actually, what you need is what Randy is saying, we need an oversight committee that can predict what the Supreme Court may well say about this rule, and that the proposed new law should go through that oversight committee as an additional step.
Yeah, I mean, that you got to have the checks and balances in place. I mean, let's face it, not every single person that's elected is an expert on law, is an expert on certain things. So when they come up with an idea or a procedural thing, it should be sent through those people so that you can make sure that it's done properly, for sure.
Yeah. And next question, what if you simply can't afford to fight back for the injustices you feel has been acted upon you? That is also a very fair question, because to take even a question of law to the Supreme Court is costly, very costly. Right?
Even just freedom of information is costly.
Well, freedom of information for most instances you get for $5.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
If you want a police record about an event that took place on the 12th of March, you can get it. It's a $5 request.
right.
Right. As with most freedom of information requests. But the challenge about freedom of information requests are that they must be precise. Right.
Yes.
And and the irony here is, I'd say go to a lawyer or paralegal to have them draft one up for you, because the precision, you if you make it too woolly, too loose, you'll get nothing.
Yeah, words matter, and that's why you're hiring those people, because they're the experts with the words, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I've done a number of them. They've not always yielded the results that we've hoped for, but sometimes they've surprised us, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what about what's good for most being more important than what's good for one? It's a fair question, Randy.
Yeah, you get that question a lot. Why are you the only one complaining? But that doesn't mean that you're wrong. So,
True.
there's always that question, right?
Well,
Why are you the only one complaining? Everybody else is in check with this. The major question should be, is he right or wrong? Right?
yeah, but you see, the problem here is sometimes you have to be in a minority of one. Sometimes being right and being the only one who believes in a thing is an important step, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
you actually have to say, you have to make your stand, stick your flag in the ground, and say, I believe this is the right thing to do, even though everybody kind of shakes their head and says, no, you're a nutcase, right?
It's the only way to make change.
Yeah, sometimes it's the only way to make change, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, so I always ask that question, is he right or wrong? But when you're talking about the law, it's not about right or wrong, eh, Peter?
No, it's about what you can prove.
I had a lawyer tell me that once. It's the law. It's not about right or wrong, Mike.
Well, and actually, the law is largely about right or wrong. But again, if you are right, but you have zero evidence that you're right, well, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
Right.
And and hey, everything works on evidence. At the end of the day, evidence in all things should matter the most. And hey, I just put in a review to the LTB because, in my view, the adjudicator at the LTB made the wrong decision because he believed somebody's story, and that story had no evidence to back it up.
Right.
Right. They said there's a police report. Well, excuse me, saying there's a police report, unless you put it into the evidence, I don't believe you.
Yeah, you got to read that police report word for word, verbatim, right?
Yeah. And especially when you're trying to kick out, a tenant because of an alleged illegal act that was reported to the police. Well, that illegal act, that illegal act doesn't necessarily have to be a crime according to the Residential Tenancy Act, but that alleged legal act really should be proven.
Right.
And and that's the truth of the matter, and that's why your lawyer friend said, you can't prove it without evidence.
Yep.
It's all about the evidence.
Yes.
All right. And the papers can print what the hell they like. They don't necessarily need to have evidence to print a newspaper, but realistically, they should.
There used to be accountability for reporting, right? And now there isn't any.
It used to be part of journalistic ethics.
Yes.
Have evidence to back your story up.
Yeah, that got thrown out the window. Now it's first to the post, and it's horrible. They get a story out that's totally wrong, and nobody cares because they got it out first, right? And you should wait for the facts to come out because today's news is just horrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. All right, let's move on. So it looks like West Nile virus is back.
It's never been gone. I try to treat it that way. I never let my guard down from that. because they do the testing. It seems to be done really slowly in the summer. And by the time they reach Niagara, half the summer's gone.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
so you got to approach with caution. As soon as it starts getting night, you got to start thinking about the mosquitoes. If you're going out into the bush, you got to wear the long sleeves, even if it's warm, for the protection against ticks and mosquitoes.
yeah.
You're better to protect yourself and be proactive. I had my wife's cousin got West Nile, and he's passed away now. But the neurological problems caused from him having West Nile and them taking long to diagnose it was a horrible situation, and he ended up passing away from all the problems.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's
the
actually the
neurological
worst. That's actually the worst aspect about this bug, isn't it? Because
yeah,
many people who get it, it's kind of probably the vast majority. They kind of suffer for a couple of weeks and then they're done, right?
right.
But with every odd person, they suffer exactly what you're saying your friend did, right?
Well, yeah, we were watching the one day this guy
debilitating.
walking down the street with two canes, trying to get every muscle working. And I says, "Holy cow, what happened to this guy? Look at him." And my wife looked and went, "That's my cousin." And lost mass weight, and huge neurological problems. He had to teach himself how to walk again and everything, right? So this West Nile is nothing to ignore. And soon as dusk comes and the mosquitoes are out, you're wise to cover up. You're wise, to be proactive.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. For example, if you're outside on your balcony or something, if you have like fans, particularly moving or the fans that move, mosquitoes don't like fans.
Yeah, they're pretty light, eh?
They want to stay away from fans. So, even if you're sitting out there in the evening and the fans are going and they're keeping you, they're going across you, the chances are that those mosquitoes will stay away.
Yeah, and then they always say standing water on your property, make sure that it's taken care of, and do the proactive things. And
like if you've got a pond, make sure the water in it's rotating.
Yeah, stir it up, whatever you have to do, because there's some serious problems here. West Nile is nothing to laugh at, right? And I don't know. It seems like our medical seem to be slow on certain things like West Nile and
I would
and
say
Lyme disease too, right? Lyme disease, Canada seems to be way behind on Lyme disease too.
Well, Lyme disease is typically caused by people who don't eat veggies.
Well, the deer ticks cause Lyme disease. And I have 3 friends that have had horror stories of getting Lyme disease in Canada and being mistreated. And Canada's treatment for Lyme disease is outdated. And they really take a long time to diagnose the problem. So Canada, for some reason, is way behind on that.
But it's one of these things that is primarily consigned to the past, isn't it?
Yes. And it shouldn't be, because it's happening today, right? Like, But I believe that West Nile has never gone, and we should treat it that way.
Well, in fact, actually, pretty well every summer every summer they should remind us at the beginning of summer about the possibility of getting West Nile disease.
Yeah, I don't need to wait for regional health to confirm it's here. I just assume it's here and address it that way.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the right thing to do. But I think it would also be germane for the public, Public Health Ontario or Niagara Public Health to be saying, hey, summer's back. Remember the dangers of West Nile virus.
Yeah, that should start in the spring for sure.
Yeah. End of April, early May, that type of thing. You know,
Yeah.
we should be
because we got a warning now, and
Yeah.
we're halfway through summer.
Yeah, exactly. It's way too late, right? And
Yeah.
you know, I'm not. I always put these on because it's the right thing to do. We should be talking about it for a couple of minutes to remind everybody. And you know, but again, you're right. That should be way earlier in the season. Right?
Yeah, it scares me that it could be overlooked for that long, and hopefully nobody's gotten it, gotten a case of it in the area since then. They say there's no cases that are reported, but like I said, they took so long to diagnose my wife's cousin. I really question the system that we use.
Okay, and good morning, Karen Fraser. Welcome to the show.
Morning, Karen.
One of the things that always bothers me is I was talking the other day about vaccinations, right?
Yeah.
Vaccinations, and you know how like you probably had the polio, TB, and what's the other one? And
Yeah, I got the
smallpox.
mark right there.
Yeah, you probably had those. You probably had those three when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty well everybody of our generation did, probably across the world. Maybe
Yes.
if you were living in deepest Africa in a village somewhere, you might not have gotten it, but most urban centers in Africa would have gotten it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what would have happened is they would have been vaccinated at school, most likely. You know, they line up, they give the injection and next one, right? You know, so most kids would have been vaccinated, right? In most parts of the world for that type of thing. But then today we have different vaccinations that the kids are given. And I'm wondering whether, have we dropped those original three? Are we in danger that, for example, a resurgence of polio?
Yeah, you got polio, tuberculosis.
And the other one was smallpox.
Yeah, and I know for a fact that there's a problem here, because my wife works at Rexall on Lundy's Lane, and the migrants, the people seeking asylum coming into Canada are at the Carencroft and other hotels, right?
Yep.
There's like 13, 14 hotels, and they come to the drugstore all the time. The one guy came in and he said to my wife, "You have treatment for worms." And he's pointing to his face because he's got these big bumps on his face. That's from botflies putting their eggs inside the skin, and then they grow inside and come out.
Yeah.
So he was allowed to come into Canada with that in him, which scares the hell out of me, because if he's allowed to come into Canada with that in him and it's undetected, then what else is happening here?
Mm. Yeah,
I found that very disturbing, even though it was just a small little story.
Well, he needs to go to realistically, he needs to go to the hospital or to a doctor, doesn't he?
Yeah, I'm sure we don't have common medicine for that because we don't have the botfly problem like that, right?
Because we don't have a lot of that stuff here, right?
But the problem is that he got in the country with that, which shows me there's not very good screening happening there, right?
Oh yeah. And
I mean, you bring a piece of wood from the United States, and they ain't going to allow you because of different types of worms and things that could happen, right? Different types of bugs that could come in. They're going to check that piece of wood for all that first before you bring a piece of wood in. If a person could come in with that on them, then that shows you that there's not very good screening being done, right? Like,
well, how would you know? You know, I don't know. How would you know?
Well, they know. I mean, they grew up with this kind of stuff. Right.
I grant you. And it's probably
they know what it is.
Yeah, and it's probably just a lotion that they put on it, which kills the
Yeah, they probably have a common treatment for it that we do not. Right.
Yeah. And that's the point. Is that it's a common problem in an area in some other part of the world, but it's never been heard of here, right?
And it's just a small example, but I think it's a big one of the problems that we're facing when someone's coming from a different country and we don't know the background of them medically, right?
Yeah, and when you think about what happened in the 16th century to the Huron tribe, right,
Yeah.
and wiped out by the common cold.
Yes. Yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, tuberculosis is on the rise again.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things coming in that I don't think are being screened for, or there's poor processes in place.
Well, and actually, should so now there's a set of I don't know what the kids are getting for their injections now, but it is entirely different than what you and I got way back when.
Yeah, and is it
And
better or is
while
it worse?
smallpox has been eradicated, does that mean that we do not have, we should ignore the smallpox virus? I don't think so.
Yeah, because
I mean, vaccination. I mean,
we thought we had measles under control and
yeah,
everything else, and they're all on the comeback, right? So
yeah,
I think we got to stop dropping our guard and maybe start raising some flags that we got to start checking for this and maybe come up with better screening systems.
yeah. And in fact, actually, that's it's part that sort of thing should also, and especially if you're in contact with people who've come from other countries who may well be bringing diseases with them. Part of our wellness check should be for checking for some of these things.
I know they do that, but it's not a fast process, right? People are already here, and you're checking them. You didn't check them before they came here. You didn't have a process to do that. You know what I mean? So they're already here.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're already here, it's too late if they had something, right? Like,
yeah, I know.
So
and you can't blame the individual because they probably didn't know they had it.
No, I'm not blaming the individual at all, but it's our process, and the big rush, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to allow all these people in right now, and they did. They let them in, and we're in a huge state of problems from it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like the screening process was done very well. It scares me, and like you said, now in Canada, we're probably going to have the comeback of some of these different diseases.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, you see, I think that the basic ones that we got rid of through those original vaccines that we developed, right, things like polio, right, it's been largely eradicated in the most part of the world, right? Where polio exists, it is usually in the back country of some underdeveloped country,
Right.
And it's not the only reason for that is because there is no injection capable, nobody's actually visited those parts and offered the vaccines, right? And it's just largely about geolocation, right? And
Well, there's also,
I
know there's problems of trust too, right? Some black
in some parts of the world, that's true.
Some parts of the world, the black people do not trust the vaccine systems and will not get one, right? They don't trust it because of the way they've been treated through the centuries. You can't blame them, right?
And I understand that. I do understand that.
Yeah. So it's a scary world, right?
Yeah.
And if we're gonna start talking about mass asylum intake, these things should be thought of beforehand, not while it's happening.
Yeah. All right. Moving on. The Grimsby Peach King Centre is nearly gone. Right. They've basically been pulling this down. The demolition is being basically part of a $36 million renovation and rebuilding of the centre.
And what a nice place, really. When you look at it, you got your arena and then you got your center there for the whole community to use all year round. What a good idea.
Get it, providing it's rebuilt.
Yeah, well, they're going to work on it and they're going to have a really nice facility and it's going to be great for their community. I like the idea of having it all in one place like that. I think that's a community center, right? We got marketplace in one place, we got an arena in another place, we got this at another place, and it's all segregated here, right? I love the idea of having it all under one property. That's a great idea.
Well, actually, the thing is, I was going to say, I have to wonder who we lost community centers overall in our society, because I remember when I was young, there was always halls that would be used for meetings and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, as a young person, I probably didn't understand the meeting that was going on in the hall, but hey, there was always meetings going on around the neighborhood about whatever, right? And now we don't seem to have them anymore. And you kind of say, well, where can we book a hall to do this? And it's like there's 3 in the city. I'm being cynical, but you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, the feeling of community is gone, right?
Yeah.
We have in Niagara Falls the tourist sector, and then spatters of this, that, and the other thing throughout the city, right? so the tourist sector is kind of like a separate entity altogether, even though it engulfs the whole city, right?
Well, if you think about it, it's like, how can you, so the few places that you can meet is like the Lions Hall on Drummond. You could have a meeting hall there, right? Obviously it's not going to be on the night when Lions Club meets, and that's a granted, right? Always a granted, because they get first priority on their own hall, right? But you could get meeting space there. We no longer have the other centre that used to be in Stamford. It's being replaced by what's that now in Stamford? Was it the one down on near Sobbies that's gone, right?
Yeah, and they used to have Optimus Hall. That's gone.
Optimist is gone because that's now Sullivan Mahoney. And it used to be that what you used to have was, when I was a kid, you kind of, if there was a public meeting, let's say in a particular area, because of I don't know, a city problem in that particular area, there'd always be a meeting hall you could go to in that area.
Right.
City owned meeting hall, so you could go, local councillor would come along, you could voice your views about what's going on, and that's gone now, hasn't it? That doesn't exist in our modern society.
Yeah, I like the idea that Grimsby's got going, and well, they always have their Peach Festival, and it's historic and it's ongoing forever. They believe in their history. Here in Niagara Falls, you got a historic building, tear it down, let's put up a hotel. We don't seem to cherish our heritage very much, where they should be making a living off our history in Niagara Falls. I mean, the history in Niagara Falls is amazing, and they got opportunity here like no other place in the world to really, really make a great big historical thing that would be very interesting for everybody.
Yeah. And, okay, so hopefully they're basically saying the arena and centre will remain open until March next year, but will operate without lobbies for a season, right? So they're going to be rebuilding it, reshaping it, etc., etc. So I wish them well on that, and I hope it gets done, and I hope it remains a good resource for Grimsby.
Yeah, because look at our $11 million blunder right in the middle of the city. That nobody's, they have the farmers market there, and there's no parking, right? That's a huge complaint I'm hearing about the new building they put there by Ferry Street. And, they put the farmers market there, and you go down there to try and buy something and support your local community, and there's no parking anywhere.
Well, actually, I have a bigger, more fundamental issue with the farmers market. The farmers market is really not even selling hardly any of it sells fruit and veggies anymore. Most of it's what you would call, what you call a flea market more than a farmer's market.
Yeah, and I don't see.
I'd like to see us have a proper fruit and veg market, what I call a proper market. So you can go get there, you get your pound of tomatoes or your apples or your peaches or whatever. And part of the thing about markets used to be that markets would sell them cheaper than greengrocers.
Yeah, that's the problem with this. This is not selling cheaper.
No.
You go to our farmers market, and I don't even know if all the products, Ontario food.
No,
I think some of the fruit that you're buying there is not of Ontario or Canada, and I find that appalling.
Yeah.
Our farmers market should support community and should be that way all around. I mean, look how many farms there are around here that you could probably get a really good farmers market going if you talk to them all, but the prices are crazy.
Yeah. And that's part of the challenge is like, many of these markets, they're good for knickknacks, and hey, they're interesting, what they sell, but it's not a farmer's market. It's not a real market. And I really crave for the old, for bringing back real markets. I remember a market in London that I went to from years ago, where basically there would be a lot of stalls that would be selling veggies. There'd be a lot of stalls that would be selling cheap materials, so you could make tablecloths or bedspreads or clothing, or etc., etc. So the poorer person could get, could make their own shirts or make their own dresses, etc., etc. And many people often did make their own stuff, right?
Right.
Particularly for the kids, right? And the point being is the market was there because it fulfilled a certain sector of the economy. Now that sector almost is gone.
Grimsby seems to have a nice little community center idea, and maybe we should use that as a catalyst for here, because we need some kind of community thing to pull us together. I don't know, Niagara Falls seems to be left behind, and we don't have a community feeling anymore.
Yeah. And the irony here is that, okay, you could say that in large part may well be due to the fact that we're a tourist town, but in fact, actually, the tourists come and go, but we as a community are still here, right?
Yeah, but we seem to be forgotten.
Yeah, and that's the point. And the city and particularly the city council spends more time focusing upon the people who are here for 2 minutes than they do that are here for a time.
And that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
That's a disconnect that's really harming our whole city. We got a city of 100 and change thousand people now, and we don't have very much community input for anything.
Yeah. Okay, so Randy says you never need a very big hall for the few that have an interest in showing up to put up any fight, right? Okay, get you, Randy. You have priced farmers at their own roadside stand. Have you priced farmers at their own roadside stands lately? Yeah, our farmers can't compete with from China in a sea can. Yeah. Yep, absolutely right. Karen Fraser says the city paid a consultant to report on historical tourism and then shelved it. And then through the report, they said historical tourism is a good thing. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? The historical tourism in Niagara Falls could be amazing.
Yeah. Oh, the history we have here.
Yes.
Right. It's bloody in part, but hey, it's an important history, and people want to learn that kind of stuff. It's what will keep people here for, what turns a 1/2 day stay into a 4/5 day stay, isn't it?
Yeah, you could go from Fort Erie all the way to Queenston on the history of Niagara Falls.
Yeah. And Niagara Falls used to have an even mix between tourist and manufacturing, which was the base. Yeah.
Yes, we had the biggest hitters in the world here for manufacturing because of hydro. And soon as they made hydro, see, because we had clean hydro in Niagara Falls, we got it cheaper.
Yeah.
And when you were producing dirty hydro, it was more expensive. Soon as they put the grid on one system, we lost the cheap hydro and we lost all industry. They were here for the hydro. That was it. Nothing else. And as soon as we lost that edge, industry was gone. We still have great access with the canals and everything else to do something about industry. But I don't see Canada doing anything to improve the situation.
Yeah. And that's a problem area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to get our community back.
And like we were talking before, Peter, industry itself, if you get one big industry and then you feed off of the byproducts, one big industry turns into 4 or 5 right away.
Yeah.
So Canada should learn from the past industry we had here in Niagara Falls, especially the industry we had in Niagara Falls, because they were the biggest players in the world and they were all here. And we should learn from that and try and figure out how to attract that industry again in a better way.
And I'd like to ask a question in that regard as to why can't we have cheap hydro? We're the producers of it. Why can't the industrial and residential users of said hydro in the local area get it cheap?
Well, see, clean credits should be the way they should go. They should give credits for people, for places that produce clean hydro, and they should give credits to even developers that leave a big tree up to suck up the carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. So credits is the way they should be doing things. And
well, in fact, actually, the question about trees is one that what should happen, the process should be that there should be a tree person that goes through every proposed development and says, these trees, marks off the trees that are not permitted to be removed.
Right. So if there's a 30% tree canopy requirement, that should be done before you do the development.
Exactly.
Not clear cut and then do it, and give tax credits for the trees that you leave up.
Well, a tree that's 300 years old, that's a healthy tree of 300 years old. You don't want to knock that down and put in a brand new one yearling, right?
Yeah, you're not you're harming the environment, not replacing. It's not a makeup for it at all. No.
Yeah.
And they know that, and everybody knows that.
Okay. So Alicia Mary asked the question, what industries in Niagara Falls were the biggest in the world?
Well, cyanamide, which is Pfizer today, right? Washington Mills, which was carborundum. They were one of the biggest ones. General Abrasives and Lyonite. All those companies. We had Domtar. We also had Kimberly-Clark, Burgess Batteries. Those were the biggest players in the world today. They've changed their names to different corporations, right? Cyanamide is now Pfizer, right?
Yeah.
They're just different names. Anything that was Oxy used to be Hooker Chemical until they caused Love Canal, right? So they just changed their names, but they were all here. Every single one of the biggest players in the world were here.
Okay, so Randy says we can't have cheap hydro because the cheap is sold to the USA grid and market. Yeah.
You know what, Randy, you're right. There was a point when we were selling our power to Quebec and United States for cheaper because we have an overabundance of power from the direct energy that was being created from wind and solar. And we actually sold the power to Quebec and the United States cheaper than what we were getting charged for it, if that makes sense to you. I'd like to know how it makes sense to you, because it never made sense to me.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, and the last one we have is we have the hydrogen plant coming in.
We got the hydrogen plant coming in. We got a battery plant coming in to Port Colborne, which is going to be a big one too, right?
Yeah.
So there is some industry coming back, but not half as much as we used to have. We just finished having the big forge, Welland Forge in Welland had shut down. For the last 10 years of their operations, they were only operating on midnights because hydro was cheaper then.
All right.
So that just shows you how they drove out the industry there.
Yeah. Okay. One final thing. New Ridgeway McDonald's is holding a fundraiser for Niagara food banks.
Yeah, we can't have enough of them in today's world, right?
Yeah. Well, say, hey, so long as they're not putting McDonald's in the food banks, I'm great.
Well, I can't understand, if they're the producers of food, why they just can't give out free food to people that are homeless.
Whoa, Mr. Cushman, you've just destroyed McDonald's profits.
Well, what's the difference in donating to a food bank or giving out some food and writing it off, right? Like, I can't wrap my head around that one, but I think that we need more help for food banks, and they should be going to some industries.
Well, one of the problems
is going to get the money.
Yeah, one of the problems we have is, why have we got food banks in operation here in Niagara? Why do we, we have a fundamental problem when we're operating out of food banks, right? And we have a lot of food banks in pretty well every township here in Niagara. We have major problems in the area about starvation, about nutrition, homeless, etc. We need to, we need resolutions to that.
Yeah, Peter, last year I had a little program growing where the asylum seekers, where the hotels are, I was getting some of the leftover food from there and feeding the homeless. And the amount of people that I was helping, it didn't take long, and there were about 15 people I was helping every week with food every day. So there's a lot of people out there that need the help. The food banks, we have more people going to food banks than ever before. More retired people on fixed incomes going to food banks than ever before, and nothing being done about it.
Retirement? Who can retire?
Yeah, that's where we are today. Those that are already on a fixed income, and with groceries and everything going up the way they are, there's no way to make extra money to make ends meet. And these people have to pay for the roof over their head, and then they have no money left for food. So they find themselves at food banks now, totally embarrassed, hiding in the corner eating, when they've lived a normal life their whole life on everything until, just recently.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I applaud the work that they've done. I have, I have a big problem with us having food banks in the first place, but it is a fact of life that we need to live through, and we need to, unfortunately, do something to, we need to be improving our city. We need to be bringing in, we need to have higher value jobs for everything, everywhere.
Yes, sir. Or if people insist that they have to pay minimum wage, maybe they should start help paying for some apartment buildings for geared to income people, so the people that work for them can live somewhere.
Well, actually, somebody suggested something more or less like that, that if your employer employs people on minimum wage, then they should be forced to pay $5 an hour for housing, for local housing.
I believe we have to tap into that, because, okay, if you think you have to pay minimum wage, these people need a place to live.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to have to start helping with that supply chain, because otherwise we're going to have to raise minimum wage again, which amounts to absolutely no help at all. because we raise minimum wage, and then food goes up and everything else goes up, and it negates the reason why we raised minimum wage in the first place.
Yep, yep. And that has a value. I understand the value of that. All right. Randy's saying have a good day, and so we should really really heading out.
Yes.
And you know, the grand opening of this new McDonald's is 4 p.m. on August 8th, and they're going to be donating a chunk of their sales to local food banks.
Well, I think that's awesome, and I hope that more people take note and do the same thing.
Yeah. All right. And I think we can kind of call it quits there. And I think we should be saying goodbye to Niagara, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Okay. Have a good day, Niagara.